Hi, I'm going to do a video here a little bit on how to get started with angles, as well as how to imagine and get a sense for what the angles of a master box that this whole thing could fit into. First, I'm just going to think about the main angles, the closest point here, the leading point, lowest leading point of the leading edge, which is very low as well, not very tall. But I'm thinking about this angle and this angle. I'm just going to think about this part of the box for now. I see this edge. You may not be able to see that, but I know that there's this edge. You know, it's a box with a little bit of height. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about making sure that I understand these lines are on the same team. And what I want to think about, in addition to that, is transforming this two-point perspective horizontal plane into a temporary vertical two-point perspective plane. One of the confusing things about perspective that doesn't really get explained a whole lot, in my humble opinion, is that sometimes we're thinking of these guidelines, these perspective guidelines, as being on a ground plane, and sometimes we think of them as being on a vertical plane, and the angles they share similar angles, so it can be confusing, but I'm trying to use it to my advantage here, because it's just going to help me get off to a better start. And I'm going to extend this all the way back to where now I'm going to start thinking about how would this fit into a big old box that I'm going to try to create for this entire object. I'm going to think about how far back the furthest back point is, and if I drop a plumb line vertical straight down from that, where it would meet up with this extended line. I'm going to think about how high this would go. And I'm going to start thinking about what would the angle of this point be in this sort of big old box. And luckily I already have a pretty handy sense of what that angle would be, because as I extend this one, it ends pretty close to that. Still have to think up a little bit to include that point. But then I know that the angle of that for the main box is going to be something along those lines. Literally. I'm going to take this leading edge and I'm going to just raise that up, extend that. To think about this corner of the box. that mostly, well, no. Let's think about this one too. Take care of all the lines that are on the same team. At least have an idea what they are. And I think about even that, sort of trying to include this whole shebang inside this imaginary vertical plane, because that way I can get a better sense of these angles, which I'm having to sort of understand those in an imaginary kind of way because there's no actual box back there. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to get those down on paper, but I want to just kind of, for now, for this one, finish this box idea. So I've done all those, the ones going to the right and away, and just kind of, I will say I'm mostly eyeballing them to make sure they seem to be jiving up with what I know these angles would be doing. And like I said, I'll get more specific in a different video. But then I'm going to come back and look at the left and away lines. And it's going to be a similar thing. It depends on how inspired I am. But I might try to sort of imagine the entire thing going down that way too. That starts to get a little bit more cumbersome than I feel like. And so mostly I feel like I can get this angle. I have this. And from there I'm going to start thinking about, okay, it's my vertical plane where this edge of this box is going back to that point, and it appears, that back edge appears smaller. This edge with this line going away will appear smaller. This point down here is lower and therefore closer than this point right here. And one thing I can do, even though you can't see this, is play with this idea of the finding the rectangle within the perspective setup. I want to make sure that's not kind of horizontal. And then I'm going to take that up to here, and I'm hoping that this point and this point are sort of directly across from each other, which they're not exactly. And that probably has to do with not being quite careful enough here. But that will at least get me a good start for making sure that these angles of this main box are working. I am going to sketch that one into, although I'll have to sort of think about how to explain that a little bit better. But just to kind of finish up this, how I would imagine a box for something like this. Ooh, I made those lines good and dark so they would show up, but now they're not erasing. And my swivel seat is swiveling. Things are tough all over. But that is how I would go about just trying to see what kind of box this would fit into. And it takes a decent amount of thinking and imagining what these angles would be doing and how high something is and how far back something will be going. But hopefully that gives you a decent idea of how one way to go about drawing something like this. I'm thinking of that master box. I'm going to end this for now. I am going to be talking about how I would think of this as sort of a shape that I would cut off instead of thinking about, oh, tilted planes are a whole different, can be a whole different wacky thing. But okay, there you have it. Check it out. Find other objects. See if you can sort of construct a box around them. Play with that idea of temporarily transforming something from a horizontal to a vertical to help find the angles, and have fun.